your role specifically in being here is, you know, all of the things we talked about with like how like I have a stronger confidence in the connection to the divine, and I needed you to bring me into the body. Like, that's why you're here. Like, you are the, rather than even a pit stop, you're like the diving board, you're like the starting block. And you were sent here to be a receiver of these divine souls, to help them reconnect to their physical vessel and really learn themselves. But like that is why you have, like, your gifts are the same. They are directed in a different manner. And it is, like, it really, you have gifts that people don't have. Like, you know things about other people's bodies that are not like able to be known any other way, which is why you are so divinely meant to be in the position that you're in. And when discussing things like this joy, this love, and the ability to receive joy and love, and the experiences that make it feel unsafe for us to do so, it all goes back to that then being applied to sexual joy and love as well, and all of that emotion. And so it's like, as a child, because of the traumas that we go through, we are taught to fear that it is not safe to express our fullest self, to laugh as loud as we want to cry as loud as we want to be as joyful, be as excited, think everything is so cute, like, just be as affected and impacted by the experience of life as you are, because that triggers our parents, and our parents are our safety. So what's easier to process as a child is to assume that you're the broken one, right? Not the parents who can't let you experience those emotions, but you experiencing them is creating an environment in which you don't feel safe because of their reaction. So instead of identifying that the problem is the receiving end instead of the expression, we backpedal, go back into our shell, and get in this safe space where we disassociate from our own emotions, our own experience, and exist solely to regulate everybody else's emotions and experiences, especially as women. And then we end up going through life, piling on all of the confirmation bias, all the experience, all the traumas on top of it. And we end up in these situations where we're then supposed to be able to understand sexual desire and, consent, and like what you do want and what you don't want. And it's impossible to know because you've not actually allowed yourself to identify what you wanted and what lit you up and what made you feel excited and happy and joyful your entire life. And so then when you try to lean into things that make you feel happy, excited, and joyful, sexual intercourse, sexual experiences, sexual desire in general, which is a very natural part of our lives, right, of our biology, we're shamed for it because that triggers the wounds within our parents, right? And so it's that conservative purity, shame, and guilt cycle that has been passing down from generation to generation to generation. And it goes so, like, it impacts so much more than just this, like, purity culture and like sex in general. I feel like what's been shown to me recently is that strong connection, and how, like, all of my clients who are dealing with these difficulties in expressing love, in receiving joy, it also manifests within their sexual relationships and within their sexual traumas. and their ability to feel confident within themselves and tap into that desire and that like fire within themselves. And then their bodies are manifesting it physically. And they're like, no penetration. I can't enjoy this. What do you mean? Right? They shut it all down. And so even just talking to Haley yesterday, right? It was this huge aha moment that's like, this shame and guilt for feeling sexual desire and joy, like, doesn't just impact our sexual desire. It actually impacts everything all around. And as a result, we are thrown off. Like we don't key in on the actual imbalance and the actual problem because of all that shame and guilt and because of all the gaslighting and because of all the programming from the external sources. And so it's like we are at war with our own selves. And how are we supposed to identify and like align with your most authentic self if that voice in every way is shame and guilt? It's like
that is a great summary of all of the things right there.
Yes.
That is
it's like, oh my God.
Though I will say, I feel much more important in my being the diving board than the pit stop.
You are. You're definitely, yeah, you're not a pit stop. Yeah, you're a starting block for sure. For sure.
I think it's insanely important that people are given the opportunity to, like, express what they're actually feeling from a young age. Like, to not be shamed into their experience, to not be stifled in their emotions, to learn that their emotions are valid and that they can be expressed in the safety of their parents and in their own home. You know, and there needs to be, there's a time and a place to express emotions safely. We have conversations with our kids all the time. Like, if you fall off your bike in the middle of the road, I respect that it hurts, but you can be hurt on the sidewalk, because if you stay in the road, you're gonna be dead. So, like, yes, there's a time and a place to express that you're hurt, but sometimes you have to get to a safe place, you know? We have lots of conversations, and there's a respect, like, when you start off a family with teaching that emotions are safe and that you can express them, and that, yes, anger is a healthy emotion to have. Anger is healthy. You need to be able to learn how to express anger safely. A safe expression of anger would be potentially screaming into a pillow, using a punching bag, you know, going for a run. All of those things could be safe expressions of anger. Screaming at your sibling, or punching a sibling, or self-harm, those are not self-expressions of anger that are safe. And when you can kind of set that boundary for kids and teach them how to express anger safely, then there's a respect of everybody else in the family of, okay, leave them alone, they need to go express their anger, and then when they're done, they'll come back and we'll go ahead and resolve the issue. I was very upset this past weekend. We were in a hotel room. She wanted to watch a show. It wasn't her turn. She was exhausted. She about lost her mind. I mean, just like, and she's a big emotions kind of kiddo anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So she's so angry. And I didn't realize what had happened. I was in the bathroom. And so when I came out, she's sitting here and she is just like screaming into her pillow. And I walked out, I was like, what is going on in here right now? You know, like, I had an attitude. And Tanner goes, Aria just needs to scream into her pillow for a bit. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine then. You know, she had nowhere else to go. We're in a hotel room, you know. It wasn't like she was just throwing a temper tantrum just for attention. She was trying to get this anger out. There was a respect from her brothers.
Yeah.
They weren't like, oh my gosh, shut up, Aria, it's so loud, we're trying to watch something. Like, they weren't getting upset about it. And they told me, she needs
they were like, Mom.
Pillow. And I'm like, yeah. I was like, oh,
okay.
Cool. No, I don't need to do anything with this. And then she did that for a few minutes, and when she was done, I was like, are you feeling better? She was like, yeah. And I was like, do you want to come snuggle up with me? And she just snuggled right in, and she was good to go. But it's like, if I were to have come out and said, we are all in a hotel room together, nobody needs to be listening to us, you can't go waking up the other rooms and all this kind of stuff, well, then it's like, okay, I'm not allowed to express anger. Okay, so the next time I express anger, I won't say anything, and I won't do anything. I'll shove it down deep. Yeah. And I'm going to let it build and build and build until I haul off and smack someone. And the same thing goes for, like, in the other avenue, when especially as children are starting to learn about their bodies and starting to experience, like, I mean, there it is not uncommon for like little girls to be riding on their bike and kind of wiggle back and forth a little bit, like, ooh, that's kind of an interesting sensation, you know?
No,
And like,
of course.
if you were to come over and be like, what are you doing? Stop doing that because it looks inappropriate. Yeah, it's because they're accidentally stimulating their clitoris. They don't know what it means. And it feels kind of good.
No,
Like, let it happen. But just say,
exactly.
you know what?
Exactly.
Like you want to, that's not a really safe way to ride a bike right now. By wiggling so far side to side, you might fall off. Like, let them know what the actual problem is, right? If they're on
Right.
training wheels and they're sitting in their garage wiggling back and forth, whatever. Let them do what they're going to do. They're exploring their body. It's fine, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Okay. So I actually have a question about that then. So I feel like something that, being the non-mom over here, um, something that was an interesting experience for us because I was a girl, obviously. Okay, that was probably not what I should have said. I identify as
Still
female,
are.
and so does my sister. Okay, there, thank you. I am female, and so is my sister, and my mom is the caretaker, not like the babysitter for my sister's two boys. So my mom being someone who does not have experience with boys, it's a whole new world for her. And Michael being Michael, um, I think dealt with the boundaries that were, he's a lot like Tanner, we'll go there. In the sense that like the emotional stuff that he needed probably wasn't really there in his childhood,
Yeah, yeah.
early years. And so Johnny coming out is like a tornado, right? And he is a lot more boy. And so there's been a lot more of the grabbing of his own body parts, right? How how have you handled that in the past? And
Yeah.
how do you tell parents, like, what do you tell them to do with all of that, knowing that like it's not a dirty thing, but like, can we talk about that a little bit? Can you tell me what you think, your thoughts?
So my first thought is that the first thing is like, don't draw big attention to it. I think there's this instinct from a lot of parents to make it stop immediately because, oh my gosh, heaven forbid somebody see. And there are some parents out there who are a little bit like, look at me parenting. You know, like they feel like the spotlight
Oh
needs to
yeah.
be on them. They're very big with their parenting, you know? Where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, your child is the star of their own show. You, as a parent, you are a supporting character. You are not the one that they are not living your life. Like, you are here to support them. And so
Mm-hmm.
being big and like, look at me parenting is not typically the type of parenting I am usually a big fan of personally. And I don't think it feels really good for kids either because there's this level of like shame and embarrassment because they didn't know that they did anything wrong. And now you're telling everybody they did something wrong. So my first thing is
Mm-hmm.
like, get with them, getting on our level, and just saying, "Hey, do you have to go potty?" That's my first question. Do you have to go potty? No. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You keep grabbing your genitals. Is there something wrong there? Are they itchy? Is there pain there? What's going on? And a lot of times they're like, "Oh, it just feels good. I didn't know I was doing it." It's like, okay, cool. It is perfectly fine for you to be touching your genitals. However, there are safe places to do this. So you can touch your genitals in your own bedroom with the door closed or in a bathroom with the door closed. But it's not really appropriate to be touching your genitals around other people. And after you do so, you need to make sure you wash your hands because there are germs there that we don't want to be trading with other people. And so there was one of my kiddos, one of my boys, I won't say which ones for their privacy, but there was, we have this rule in our house of if you want to be naked, you can be naked in your bedroom or in the bathroom, but anywhere else you need to be clothed in the house. And no naked butts on the floor because children are notoriously terrible at wiping their butt, right? And I just like don't need microscopic fecal matter all over my house. I just don't. And so I know. So I was walking by one day and I saw this child fully nude except for a pair of socks. And they were squatting down building with Legos in their bedroom. So like they fully abided by all of the rules. Naked bottom was not on the floor and they were in their bedroom. and they were building with Legos. And I was like, I mean, I can't even get upset about this. They're following all the rules. So
Right.
I kind of just like stop at the doorway and I'm like, hey, if you want to build Legos naked, you're perfectly fine to do that, but you need to shut your door when you're doing that. If you would like to keep your door open, that's perfectly fine as well, but maybe just put some underwear on. And so he gets up and he walks over towards me and just stares me in the eyes and shut the door. And I was like, I guess it's naked Lego time. Okay, this is what we're doing. And so I went downstairs, and like 10 minutes later, they came downstairs fully dressed and showed me like the whatever, the airplane that they built or whatever it was. And I was like, okay. So like I could have said, what are you doing? Put on some clothes. What are you like? And made them feel all bad about it. But it was like, no, you followed all of the rules. Your naked bottom is not on the floor, and you are in your room naked. Those are both safe places for you to be acting like this. And that's what he decided to do. And it was perfectly fine. So I think that, you know, and as the kids have gotten older, and we can talk about the sex talk too if we want to a little bit here, but like as the kids have gotten older, we have had conversations about like self-exploration and just kind of like letting them know like there are safe places to do this. It needs to be in your bedroom or it needs to be in your bathroom. And make sure that they understand it needs to be your bathroom. It is not to be done in your friend's bathroom or your friend's bedroom or the school bathroom or a locker room or a restroom at a restaurant. Like, those are not safe places. These are the safe places that you can do this. And if you get to a point where you feel physiologically driven to follow these urges, there's nothing wrong with that, but you may want certain supplies available to you. And when that happens, let me know and we can get those supplies for you. We will set up a process for you to dispose of those supplies, and there will never be any questions asked about anything. It'll just be, these are the towels or the washcloths that are appropriate to be used here. And when you are done, they will go into the washing machine and they will be washed, because I don't need your personal hand towel to be washed next to the rag that I use to wash my face. I don't need to be washing those together, you know? And so it's just having a mutual respect for each other that like, hey, these things are perfectly normal, but let's set up a safe environment where everybody feels respected in order to get what they need out of this. So that's how we handle that talk in our house. And it was met with a little bit of like, because I've actually asked Tanner, because Tanner was obviously, he's our guinea pig, right? So he's had these conversations before we had to have these conversations with Lucas. And so I asked Tanner, as we started having these conversations with Lucas, how did those land with you? How did you feel did you feel like all of your questions were asked? Do you feel like you were given too much information too soon? Do you feel, you know, he was like, I think it's all still pretty weird. I feel very comfortable with what I know. I don't feel like I was given too much information too fast. And when I think about, because I asked him, I go, how do you feel like you would have done in 7th grade if you didn't have the conversations that we had had? And he was like, oh, it would have been terrible. He's like, I wouldn't have known anything that was going on. I would have been really confused on things. People would have made fun of me. It would have been horrible. And I'm like, okay, cool. If at any point in time you feel like we are sharing too much, then you let us know and we'll stop, you know? But one of the rules in our house is that if you hear something that you don't understand what it is, don't talk about it, you don't laugh about it, you don't do anything with it until you come home and you ask us. And then we will let you know if that's something that we think is age appropriate for you, or if we think that's something that's not appropriate for you yet. And a lot of times I will give them the category. Like, this has to do with this overarching theme. Is this information you want to have in your brain right now? And Tanner, on multiple occasions, he's like, yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I don't even know anymore. Like, he was just like, yeah, we're done, you know? And so, like, because like, we were watching Ted Lasso, and there was an act of oral sex that was mentioned in the show. And Tanner was like, what is that? And I was like, well, it has to do with a version of sex. Would you like to know more? And he was like, that's kind of what I figured. I don't need to know anymore. I was like, okay, cool. And so that's just kind of how we handle it. And it just seems so far to be working pretty well with his comfort level and stuff like that. We had the conversation with Lucas about some of these things. He seemed pretty comfortable with it. He seems to come back and ask more questions, very thoughtful questions about reproductive anatomy, wants to know more about understanding like female menstruation. He had a great question where he was like, wait, so do all the girls have their periods like at the same time? Or is it, he actually said genetic? And I was like, genetic? And he was like, yeah, or is it genetic?
Oh.
And I was like, that's a fantastic question, Lucas. So we talked a lot about how it is kind of individualized, but when you have groups of women who are in close proximity together, then they tend to sync up. And he was like, that's really cool. And I was like, it is really cool. And so I don't know, that seems to work with us to just kind of like demystify a lot of the like reproductive health and the shame associated with it, and understanding a safe place to explore themselves so that they're not, you know, so they understand the gravity of what they're doing. Like Tanner has actually had to set boundaries with kids at school who were like making sexual jokes and stuff like that, where it's like they don't understand. I was like, do you think that they don't understand what they're talking about? He's like, oh no, they know what they're saying. And I go, I should clarify. I understand that they understand the mechanics of what they're saying. Do you think they understand the gravity of the implication? He was like, oh, absolutely not. I was like, okay. So, but he's had to tell kids, like one of his friends, he was like the friend was saying stuff that made Tanner really uncomfortable and felt very inappropriate for school. And Tanner had said like, hey, can you stop talking about this? Like, this is just, I don't want to hear about it. Like, just stop. And the kid was like, oh, come on, man. It's not that blah, blah, blah. Like, just giving him a hard time. And he was like, no, like, I need you to stop. I don't feel comfortable with this. And the kid kept going. So the next day, Tanner was like, you know what? I'm going to go sit over here for lunch. Like, I asked you to stop doing this. You haven't stopped doing this. I don't feel comfortable anymore. I'm going to go sit over here. And so he left and he went and sat with a different group of kids. And it was like, oh my gosh, Tanner, like, that's incredible strength. That's incredible.
Yeah. Are you kidding?
Boundary setting. Like, to be in 7th grade and be like, listen, I know that you're my friend, but you're making me feel uncomfortable and I don't want to be associated with this anymore. And I asked you to stop and you haven't. So I think we're done here until you can learn to stop.
That's insane.
And so, but I think the more that kids understand the gravity of what is actually happening in the human body, the gravity of what the actual acts, sexual acts mean, the implications of what that means, it's a big deal. They're then, it's not, I mean, it's still weird. Tanner said it. He's like, that's just, it's still that. He's like, that's just weird. Like, I don't.
Oh yeah, of course.
And I'm like, well, you don't have to get it. You don't have to have interest in it. It's fine. Like, you are not, in my opinion, you are not hormonally developed or old enough yet to feel the need to want to do any of this stuff, but you are hearing it on a regular basis. And it's important for you to understand what's being said, which he appreciates. And yeah, and like Lucas was hearing, like, his whole conversation started with like just straight up like, Mom, people are talking like, keep laughing about this number at school. And I'm like, oh, too young for this. Like,
you're like, number? Oh no.
Like, you know, oh no, what could that be? It's so weird.
What number could that possibly
be? I've never heard of a number associated with this. And so I kind of told him, I go, you know what, Lucas, I think it's time for us to go have a private conversation. And so we went upstairs and we had the entire sex talk, which I could go into detail about if you want me to, or we can for now. You want me to go for it? All right.
Why not?
For the parents out there who have children who they have not had the sex talk for yet, coming from a pelvic PT who talks about sexual health on the daily.
Pause. Or for those adults amongst us who maybe didn't get the greatest sex talk and need to reparent their own inner child a little bit, this one's for you.
Yeah. Yes.
Go ahead.
So so it starts off first with a heavy foundation of using anatomical knowledge for a long period of time. Like my kiddos, as you know, they use anatomical terms for their genitals, for their all parts of their body, right? Like if we're going to call an elbow an elbow, we're going to call a penis. And so my kiddos understand anatomy. We talk about it a lot. my kids understand the difference between a testicle and a scrotum. Like they know the
And
difference
a
between
vulva
those
and a
things.
vagina and where they're at.
And a vulva and a vagina, yep, where they are, what's on the outside, what's on the inside. So they know that anatomy, that basic anatomy is foundational. From the time they can learn to talk, they are learning those terms. That being said, if you haven't started using that terminology with your kiddos, potentially a good opportunity to start that. I think when we have so much fear or shame around words, it just leads to the entire conversation being very uncomfortable. Like if you never said the word penis to your child, and now you're trying to talk to your 5th grade or 6th grade son about sex or reproduction or anything like that, because our local school system, they do the anatomy talk in 4th grade and they do the sex talk in 5th grade, and then they go a deeper dive into 6th grade and 7th grade. And so like if you haven't had this conversation yet, it's way better for you that the kids to hear it from you than it is for them to hear it from school. School is kind of handcuffed on what they're allowed to say. So anyway, that soapbox aside. So the way,
especially with people like children are going through, I was going to say children are going through menopause. Children are going through puberty so much earlier these days as well. Like if you haven't talked to your child about what that's like, or even just the body parts associated with that, when they're in 5th grade and suddenly they have to go to the bathroom and they're like, Mom, I'm dying. What do you expect them to feel?
Right. Tons of fear, which then means that every time they have a period, they have this low level of fear associated with it. There's lots of girls that are starting in 3rd and 4th grade, unfortunately, right now. Not unfortunately, it's just what their body's doing, but it's earlier than what our generation of parenting is expecting. So the conversations are happening too late.
Yes.
So like my 5-year-old daughter, she knows what a period is. Like all of my children know what it is. She is like, okay, well, she like wants to see, like she has to have this understanding of like, well, how much blood are we talking for how long of a period of time? And it's like, and we talk about it, how I say, I'm not hurt, I'm not injured. See, I'm smiling, I'm standing upright, I'm walking around, we're playing at the pool, like we're still doing all of these things. It's not a scary thing. And so the way that it was described, I heard it, and I wish that I could credit the person who came up with this analogy for menstruation for little kiddos, because it's a beautiful analogy and it totally makes sense, and we use it in our house. But basically, every month the mom sets up a party in her uterus for a baby to come. And if there's no baby that shows up, then the mommy has to take down the decorations. And the decorations come out of the mommy in the form of blood and tissue, and it doesn't hurt the mommy, it's okay. And then the mommy will set up a new party every single month, and then if a baby comes, then the decorations stay up for the party for the baby, and then the baby gets to be born on their birthday, and that's how you have the party. And if no baby comes, then the mommy has to take down her decoration. And so that's what, this past week when I was on my period, that was the conversation. Like, oh, Mommy, you're taking down your decorations. Yep, I got to take down my decorations.
Oh my gosh.
She's like, so your belly hurts because you're taking down your, like, yeah, my belly kind of hurts a little bit, but I'll be okay, and she's perfectly fine with it. She's like, and she does say, she's like, that's kind of gross. And I go, it is kind of gross. It is kind of gross. I wish that it wasn't, but it is. Yeah. And just just validating what they're feeling, that like, yeah, it's gross, but I'm not injured. There's a difference here, But anyway, that's how we handle it with her. But the sex talk, what we do first is, now obviously I've only given sex talks to boys so far, but I would just do the reverse for my daughter. But we start off with whatever anatomy they are born with. And so that's how we start. So basically we talk about, okay, this is, for me with the boys, this is, the penis and the testicles. I do get out my anatomy book so they can see, or I get pictures online, and I show them kind of where all the anatomical structures are. We do, penis, testicles, scrotum, urethra, prostate, bladder, everything, vas deferens, and all that jazz. And then we talk about how, like, I show them, like, the tubes, like, okay, so the bladder's coming out the urethra, and then, the semen and the spermatic fluid mixed together, and that all comes out through, the prostate meets up with the urethra, and that comes out. So if you don't know anatomy, you really should take some time to go and watch some videos so you can talk to your kids about this, because it's important that boys understand that urine and semen both come out through the urethra, but they are not the same substance. Because that's something that's missed in the public schools, is they just say it comes out of the penis, well, then you have a kid with a really hydrated urine and all of a sudden he thinks he's ejaculating in school and has this fear and embarrassment. And it's like, no, 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 no. No, that's going to come with
Yeah.
arousal and all that kind of stuff and stimulation and whatnot.
Okay.
But so
I hadn't even thought
understanding,
about that.
like, yeah. And so we talk about like what's the anatomy actually like? The sperm coming from? Where is the urine coming from? How do they both use the same tube? That kind of thing. And then we put that on hold. We come over to female anatomy. So we talk about, okay, this is the anatomy of a woman. Women have 3 different holes. And so, and we don't, whether we talk about the clitoris or not, I can't remember. But we talk about like, this is the bladder, this is the uterus where the baby lives, this is the rectum, and look at the similarities. Men and women both have bladders. Men and women both have rectums. Women have a uterus where the baby lives. Their organ is kind of right here. Men have kind of this little one underneath the bladder, and that's where the sperm lives. That's where their component of the baby. And so we talk about, so then for a baby, so then we pause the anatomy for the women. Then we say, okay, for a baby to be made, you need to have a sperm and you need to have an egg. And they need to meet, merge together, and then implant in the uterus. So if the egg is starting over here in the ovary, and it has to come down the fallopian tube into the uterus, how is the sperm going to get from over here to the egg? How is that going to work? And so first we have to get them to the point where they understand it has to come out of the penis. So the first thing that has to happen is it's got to come out of the penis. Like, okay, where does the penis need to be in order for the sperm to get to the egg so that the egg can end up in the uterus? And so that way they kind of look at the pictures, and you got all the pictures in front of you, and they can kind of say like, oh, does it go through here? It's like, well, nope. That's the rectum. Do you see a tube from the rectum to the uterus? Is that going to work? And, oh no, that's not going to work. Okay. Well, maybe this. Is this okay, that's the vagina. Is there a tube from the vagina up to the uterus? Is that going to work? Oh, yeah, that will work. Awesome. So how is the penis going to get to the vagina? And so then they look at the pictures, and my one son, and again, I won't say which one, but he was like, does it need to be next to the vagina? And I was like, no, not next to the vagina. And he goes, the vagina? And I was like, nope, not on top of the vagina. She kind of looked, and he was like, inside the vagina? And I'm like, yep, has to be inside of the vagina. And he was like, okay. I was like, okay. So, then he like, all right. And so he's like, oh, so then the penis goes in the vagina, and then the sperm comes out, and then it has to go like all the way up through the uterus, up into the fallopian tube. And I go, yeah. He was like, that's a really far way to go. And I go, it is a really far way to go. It is. It's a really long journey. But before we have that conversation, I do pull up videos, like microscopic videos of sperm, so that they can see, what does a sperm look like? How does it move? And then a sperm coming into an egg. What does the egg look like with relation to the size of the sperm? So that they can understand, like, okay, this is the connection. This has to get to this, and then it has to burrow in. And so when he was able to look at it, and he was like, holy cow, those things are tiny. And they have to go that far? And I was like, they do have to go that far. And so that is how we have the sex talk. And so we end it with, okay, first of all, like the amount that we just talked about right now, like, I'm like, have you ever heard of an iceberg? Like, have you ever heard the iceberg analogy in my one? Like, oh yeah, like the tip of the iceberg. It means that you know just a little bit. And I was like, exactly. So the amount that you know right now about sex, he goes, oh, it's the tip of the iceberg. And I go, no. It is the single snowflake on the top of the tip of the iceberg. That's how much information you know right now. Okay? Unfortunately, it's the most information that most people know. That's the sad part. But I said, the issue is this. You know a tiny, 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 tiny bit of this entire world of sex. So if at any point in time you feel like you want to engage in any of these activities, it's incredibly important for you to come back and talk to me so that I can educate you on the rest of the iceberg. Because you're gonna need to have that information to keep yourself safe. I'm like, there are illnesses and diseases that could happen. There's unwanted pregnancy that could happen. There are injuries that could happen. You know, if you're somebody who your first relationship was with somebody who has like a particular kink, which I am not an anti-kink person, I'm very supportive of that as long as both parties are consensual in that. But you have no reference points, and that person is not a good teacher, like you could have an injury. And so it's important, and I didn't cover that specific part with them, but it's important that kids
Right.
understand, like, okay, I understand, basically, you understand how to turn the car on, but you do not know how to
Mm-hmm.
drive in LA traffic. Okay? Like, you know nothing
Right.
right now. So
Right.
that's kind of how we do that. And then basically we end it with, it is not your responsibility to educate your friends. It is your friends' parents' responsibility to educate them. So if you feel like, because there's going to be kids who are going to say things and they're going to make fun of you for because you don't know what they're talking about when you absolutely know what they're talking about. But that's okay. It is not your job
Mm-hmm.
to educate them. You just need to say, hey, you really shouldn't be making jokes about that. There's a lot to it. You need to go talk to your parents. Or just stay out of the conversation completely. But it's not your job to
Right.
educate other kids because you don't have enough information to educate them. Like, that's what it comes down to. And
Right.
so, and if you hear anything that you don't really understand, then it's insanely important that you come back and you say, can we have a private conversation? I heard something at school today. Because these conversations are not conversations that your sister's ready to hear yet. There's a reason why we wait for a certain level of development for that so you can understand this. If we have these conversations when you're in kindergarten, it's going to feel terrifying. You know, maybe not. Maybe we could have it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll work on that. There might be a way that we can have these conversations that aren't scary,
Ooh,
but
yeah, like a water, like the different levels, right?
like
Like
a watered
the
down
level that they
version.
start,
Yeah.
yeah, like the level that they start
Mm-hmm.
putting their hand in their
I'll look
pants
on that.
and
Yeah.
how to navigate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To think on that, how
More
we
to
could
come.
have a
Stay
little
tuned.
kid friendly conversation. I know, right?
Yeah.
But that's how we do it in our house, is basically understanding the anatomy that they are born with that they currently have, understanding the anatomy of the opposite sex, whether whoever your child decides to have a relationship with, it's important that they understand both sides of it. They understand how exactly mechanically is a child made, and then understanding that they have very limited knowledge and it's not their job to educate others, and that if they have questions, comments, or concerns, they need to redirect that back to a safe source. If a parent doesn't feel comfortable having this conversation, outsource it to somebody who feels very comfortable having this conversation, whether that's a school nurse,
Allison
whether that's a
English.
guidance counselor, whether that's me. I'm happy to have that conversation with your
Yeah.
kids. But it's very, very important, because one of the things, and we mentioned this before, but like that study that Valerie was talking about, how
Yeah.
kids who, and when I say kids, at this point I'm meaning like teenagers, those who are actually physiologically big enough to be procreating, because even though girls are kind
Mm-hmm.
of developing a little bit sooner, not all boys are able to do that yet. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in the middle school ages, so this is more towards like high schoolers. But
Mm-hmm.
the more that kids understand their own sexual pleasure, the less likely teen pregnancy is, because they are not looking outside of themselves for sexual pleasure. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, like before before religion was a thing, because that tends to be one of the biggest reasons that people feel shameful about this. I'm not saying it's the only reason, and I'm not saying all religions go into
No.
shame with this. That's not what I'm saying. But
No.
that like wait until marriage because you're supposed to type of a thing. Again,
The rule
I am not
is
opposed to people
stressed
who
too
wait for
much,
marriage.
and the reasoning is the
Is not.
message. Like the message
Yes.
gets lost. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. But if we think about pre-religion, if we think about more,
Mm-hmm.
2000 years ago is with the basics of humans, like we were just a general animal species like anybody else. Like we weren't anything special,
Mm-hmm.
right? Unless we get into like,
Yep.
you know, there's a whole other side of anthropology that people are like, we're like on the sixth round of intelligent species. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
maybe
yeah.
I'm completely wrong in what I'm saying, but that's not what today's about. So if we think about general basic knowledge of our understanding of human evolution, 2,000 years ago, like, or longer than that, I should say, more than that, actually, we were just animals trying to survive. So we required those hormonal instincts to find a mate, procreate, and keep the species alive. So like, even though we have, from a societal standpoint, moved away from just that pure carnal procreative type of state, we still have the hormones associated with that. So, and our frontal lobe development, our decision-making part of our brain is not fully developed until our mid-20s. So basically we have kids going through puberty with these highly sexualized hormones with no guidance and no decision-making part of their brain fully developed yet. They have to be given as much information as possible on like their own bodies so that they understand the repercussions of what's happening. If we teach our kids, don't touch it, don't look at it, it's inappropriate, this, that, and the other, they're still going to feel a sexual drive. You're still going to have the girls who are like totally crushing on that math teacher because he's the only teacher under the age of 40. And they're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Yep.
Oh my God. You know, like,
right.
And it's just, you know, you're still going to have boys who are like totally digging the girls because their shoulders are showing. Like, who knows, you know, like whatever. And
right. Not
going to soapbox on dress code right now, which I think is
shoulders.
A stupid thing. I think we should have conversations.
Yeah.
I think we should have conversations with our children about how an exposed shoulder is not an invitation for a sexual advance. That's a different story for a different day.
Okay. Different topic.
Different topic. But if we can teach our kids that it is safe for them to explore their own body, to find sexual pleasure in themselves, then they do not need to go seek it outside of themselves. They can use that as part of the relationship as they have built on the mental, emotional, and spiritual intimacy with their chosen partner before they progress to that sexual intimacy. And then, you know, but if you're somebody who's in your teens, like, you really want to make sure that you have a good understanding of your own sexual health so that you are able to be more selective about your partners and feel like you have more value to add in the relationship besides the sexual component. Because if you feel super shameful and guilty about the sexual side of you, then there's this like, don't let anybody say, don't let anybody show it. Then it's a really big deal when you give that to somebody else. It's like a part of you. And so if you can feel comfortable with yourself and you can say, I actually don't need to go into that relationship to do this or that, I can give myself my own sensation there, then you can see the other person more clearly as to like who they are they the right person for you, whatever the case may be, you know? And you can set yourself up for a healthy sex life. There's nothing wrong with like having a more diverse sex life. But understanding and doing it in a safe way, we talked about a little bit with Sarah, sexual awakenings for people. Like, I'm in full support of that. Like, if you are working, like if you are in a relationship or by yourself, I should say, fully consensual to the act with any parties involved, it is a safe act where nobody's going to be injured or have long-lasting illnesses or injuries or whatever the case may be. Then go do what you're going to do, you know? But if you are naive and you think the only value that you have is that you are a body for somebody else to use, then we've got a really big problem here.
Oh,
and
yeah, absolutely. Actually,
the more that we hide sex, so then the more likely we are to be stuck in those situations where people, specifically women, are kind of put in the second-class role of you are a body to be used by your male partner. That's the value you bring to the table. And it's
and your pleasure doesn't matter. Completely inaccurate. I actually, I love this because it's all like coming full circle with what we talked about in the beginning, right? So like everything that I'm seeing is people who have had a lot of trauma, sexual trauma, which is, let's call a spade. Majority of women these days have had some sort of interaction that crossed a boundary in some way, shape, or form. It is what it is.
Well, what women don't understand is like coercion is part of that. Coercion is part of that.
So that's exactly. So the piece that ties together for me is that majority of these people have an underlying fear or wound or trauma that's revolving around receiving love and receiving joy and feeling it within their bodies and then expressing that to others, right? And so if at a young age you are taught that it's not safe to experience those emotions and those sensations, and then the rest of your life, from the age of that lesson through the time that your hormones develop and like really you're like feeling the, you know, the biological call to express it, we are piling more on top of the evidence barrels full of things for guilt and shame. And so that doesn't take away our need for love and joy and connection. That actually just makes it harder for us to obtain it. And so we seek it out in other areas. So within the body code specifically, this happens a lot with like a heart wall being present, and the physical action of your body with your heart seeking out joy, love, your brain seeking out dopamine. You can call it whatever you want, but ultimately, when we have suppressed this area of human development, of human experience, we force that individual to then go through life without all of their resources on board, without everything online for them to be able to have context in the situation and learn the lessons they're supposed to learn. So if they don't have those resources and they're not able to tap into that, they're only able to tap into what they've been given, which is the hormones that are telling them they want to do it, and the guilt and shame that's telling them that that makes them a bad person, right? And so then we throw in purity culture, and we make it that it's only okay if that person loves you and you love that person. But if you don't know how to receive love and what it feels like, that dynamic is going to be flawed from the jump. So you're automatically seeking love and joy from an outside source because you don't know how to find it within yourself, because it's been demonized, right? By the touching, by the sensation, by everything. And so it only compounds into more physical manifestations of those emotional traumas because you never stop seeking that. That's the whole reason we're here, is to experience that love and joy. That's literally the point of being on this planet. And so if we, and like, okay, you could even say, what's the point of a human being? Some would argue to procreate, to keep producing. How are we going to do that if we're going to continue to shame and guilt that natural physiological process? And now we've gone even further the other way and made it to where, like, that baby that's inside you, that's not your choice. It doesn't matter how it came. You don't get to decide how you feel about that. And that child could be a result of deeply, deeply buried psychological trauma that they've never worked through. And they are in that body. Their authentic self is like screaming, like, please let me out. This doesn't feel right. I'm supposed to feel joy. I'm supposed to feel excitement. I'm supposed to be happy about this life, this miracle that I've been given, that I'm creating. And all that I feel is broken and overwhelmed and unprepared and like a failure, because that's what I've been told my whole life I am. And that if I give in to these desires, to these sensations, I'm a bad person. And as a result, everything I've done is wrong and bad and awful. Like, we take away the ability for our children to develop self-love. And so what you've done is you've created a safe space for your children to experience it, to explore it, to build Legos naked. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, you've given them that agency and that area for them to truly go and be free on their own. And like, that's such a gift, because they know what it feels like. They're not going to be searching for an external source to elicit that response within their body, and then they misconstrue that as being love and joy, right? Because that's what happens. We get turned on by the other party, and we're so not used to it and so foreign to that sensation that we're like, oh, hold on a second, that felt really good. That must mean they love me. That's what this is. I must be worthy of love if I can now feel this sensation because they've given it to me. And then they don't call you the next day, and you're like, I don't understand. Again, I'm the problem. So you're still not able to make that connection with that sexual experience being about you. Because that's what it is. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be about your sexual experience joining with someone else's and making magic together.
Yeah.
And what happens is not that. It's like it's almost a service. We go into it with like, okay, this is a duty that I'm supposed to fulfill to my partner because I have the parts that connect with his.
Yeah. And that's huge because I have the amount of women really is who I've seen the most of with that experience. Who come in to see me as newlyweds, who waited until marriage. And again, I have no problem waiting until marriage.
Yep.
No. But who waited until marriage and then tried to have sex on their honeymoon or on their wedding night and were in such severe pain that they think they're like broken. And then they have this massive level of guilt, shame, obligation of, oh, I tied this guy down and now I can't have sex with him. And I'm like, do you want to have sex with him? And they were like, well, I mean, like, you know, he's just been waiting a really long time. I was like, what? Do you really think that he married you just for your orifices? And if so, why did you marry this person? You know, like if you genuinely think that the only thing you're bringing to the table is your pelvis in some way, shape, or form, that's not a good reason to marry somebody. Like, the amount of times that we kind of like start working through that, and what they end up finding, which is such a beautiful thing, is more often than not, their husband will come into the appointments with them. What can I do to help? I don't want to hurt her. I don't need to have sex. Like, this is okay. I know this is going to take time. I don't want her to be in pain. And it's like for my patient to then hear from their partner of like, oh, I do have more value than just this. I've been putting this on me because I have been told forever that this is the role of the woman to just suck it up and deal with it. Now they can kind of start that healing, and then we start seeing massive levels of improvement because then they can actually start trusting that their partner doesn't want to hurt them, that they don't actually have to just shut up and take it, that they can say, oh, wait, hold on a second, that hurts. And then they can relax their body again. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. And then now all of a sudden the communication's picking up, and now all of a sudden the pain is starting to resolve. And it's like, it's a huge deal. It's a huge deal when you come into the relationship thinking that you have no other value than that, into the sexual relationship, I should say. And thinking that the sexual relationship is the most important component of the relationship. We talked about this before with the study about the marriages, right? Where we were looking at the marriage, they were looking at marriages and happy marriage versus an unhappy marriage, and who was having more sex. And what it showed was the happy marriages are having more sex and the unhappy marriages are having less sex. And the fallacy that was concluded from this was that if you have more sex, therefore you will be happier, which is completely inaccurate. It's completely inaccurate. So then you have people who are now putting this huge emphasis on, like, you need to have sex by this date. You need to have good sex, whatever that means. You need to have, you know, all these criteria of what sex actually means in order to have a good relationship, when really, if you would have asked any of those parties that were in these happy marriages, it was, we feel such intense mental, emotional, and spiritual closeness that we choose to elevate that through our physical closeness. And it's like, you know, there's a great book out called Come As You Are, where she talks about, the author, Emily, I'll look it up. We'll put it in the show notes. But it's a great book about, like, accelerators and brakes. Like, that's one of the philosophies that she has, where it's like, you need to learn what your accelerators are and what your brakes are, where it's like, you know, if If I'm walking into a house where I see the sink is full and the family room is a mess and the kids are running around screaming, and I go upstairs and there's like laundry overflowing, like if my husband even so much as looks at me, I'm like,
Right. Right.
you might die tonight. This
You're
is
like,
not going to happen.
these pants aren't
Whereas,
coming off. Sorry.
no, there's so much stuff to
Clean
do.
the
I
kitchen.
cannot possibly think about this. Yes.
Right.
Whereas the opposite side for him, where it's like when he experiences stress, he finds comfort in the physical closeness. When I
Yeah.
experience stress, I become very introverted, and it's like action mode,
Mm-hmm.
problem solve, get this done. I cannot
Yeah.
possibly focus on anything else until all this other
No.
stuff is done. That's a huge
Yeah.
incompatibility. And we've been together for 20 years. Yeah. I'm the worst wife in the world. He's the one who remembers these things. We've been together for a long time, 20 years, I think, maybe 21.
Time is just a construct.
And so, I mean, there we go. And so it'll be 21 this August. Okay, I'm good. And so that's a huge incompatibility. And it took us
Mm-hmm.
an embarrassingly long time, 15 years, to figure out that's what was going on between us. Where it was
Right.
like he felt like I was pushing
It wasn't
him
just a
away.
fight.
I felt like he was being needy. Right. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
solve your own problems, okay? You have hands. And he was like, oh my gosh, my wife hates me. And it was like, no, neither one of
Right.
us are true. We're both stressed,
No.
and we handle our sexual
Yes.
relationship differently in stress. So now that we have a better understanding of this, we do a lot, we spend a lot more time in our relationship trying to down regulate the stress so that
Mm-hmm.
I'm available and he is available mentally and emotionally and spiritually, so that we can then elevate the relationship physically. And so
Mm-hmm.
anyway, that book is amazing. It really helps like open up a lot of that kind of stuff. But
I love that.
going back to the kind of that purity culture situation of like, if you are sitting here in a society that's telling you, don't look at it, don't touch it, don't think about it, you're bad, evil, horrible person if you do, you know, you're
But it feels so good.
Exactly, which is shameful. That's the devil, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And then go put on a white dress and then now go procreate. What a mind F is that? Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, even people who
yeah.
don't come, because like purity culture is not a religious thing. I mean, it's heavily available in religious cultures, but it is not, you don't have to be in a religion to be raised in a purity culture type of environment. If you have parents who are very uncomfortable with sexual, like if you have parents who
because
came from
their
a
parents
religious
were
background,
uncomfortable with sexual, yes,
exactly, and they may have stepped away from their church, their religion, whatever the case may be. They may be raising you completely different than they were raised, but if they themselves never healed that sexual trauma, that lack of education, that lack of safety and comfort within their own bodies or with their partners, and now they're not having conversations with you, you're left with just this, oh, this is embarrassing and shameful and I shouldn't do anything about it. And it just exacerbates the whole process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And no, I agree. And I also think that like there's obviously so many different kinds of sex, but something that I have highlighted within my clients is the woman's experience and how often it's still external. It is still like I'm looking for this word, like their sexual desire is triggered, it's turned on by the experience of the counterpart, right? And so it's like the action that they're doing is turning them on. So they get turned on by that, right? And I'll be the first to say that I've experienced that myself for quite some time. And it is a completely different experience when you are having a sexual experience that is focused on you and how you are feeling about what's going on, and then how they feel as a result. So one of the things I talked with my client about was that there would be moments where her significant other would be initiating things, and she would have the desire, but just really kind of on that edge, right? could sort of go either way, but wasn't really like into it, right? And so I'm like, so in those moments, what is it that you do? And she's like, well, we have sex. It's just, it is what it is. And I'm like, well, how does that go? Right. How does it happen? And she's, you know, she tells me the normal, whatever. I'm like, so have you thought about like in those moments, if you do have the desire, but it's like the effort, going to the effort of like turning it all the way on, like you can't quite get that key there. Why don't you make it all about you? Like if he's the one whose key is already there, you're only receiving. It's his job to turn your key the whole way, to help you turn your key the whole way, right? And so being in a place of only receiving, whether that's physical touch, massage, that, I mean, and that's a huge thing for me. That's what I've always used, especially after my hysterectomy, because I was told that the largest sexual organ for a woman is their mind. And if I had any reservations, any fear going into my first sexual experience after my hysterectomy, I wasn't going to be able to achieve the state of arousal that was necessary to have a pain-free experience. And then I would be re-traumatizing myself repeatedly. And so getting into that relaxed state and really allowing that energy to flow within my body was necessary. And so if there were moments that like I wasn't all the way where I needed to be to have that happen, but I wasn't like, my body wasn't shutting down at the advances. It was just kind of not as, it was just taking a little bit more, right? Like right. It just, there was a little bit more resistance. That's what we did.
Yeah.
And it worked. It worked. And it was like, huh, okay. So now my clients are implementing that. And they're like, yeah, you know, there's a whole different like sensation when your arousal stems on being seen rather than just existing and partaking. Mm-hmm. Actually being seen, and how for women, that's part of it. That's part of it is when we shut down that love, we shut down that joy because it's not safe. We try to be invisible. But at the same time, we're like, please love me. Please love me. Tell me I'm worthy. But at the same time, I'm just going to hide. I'm going to hide everything that's real back here because it's not safe. But what I show you on the outside, can you love that? Is that okay? Can you accept me?
Right.
And then it leads
of women
to
out there who have.
Yeah.
Good.
Go. No,
the amount of women out there who have tolerant sex. And it's like, it may have a positive end result. Both parties may have a fantastic orgasm. But the amount of women who have tolerant sex versus excited or pleasurable sex. And it's like, you know, it's insane to me. Where it's like,
they don't even know the difference. They don't know that there's a difference.
No.
Yeah.
No. And what I talk to a lot of my patients about, because I am yet to have somebody who has come to see me for pelvic pain who's like, I love sex, it just hurts. That does not happen.
No.
Except for like traumatic injury. So if they had a surgery or a baby or something like that, that's a different story. But I'm talking about people who are like having pelvic pain outside of a birth injury or outside of a surgery.
No.
I've never had any of them come to me and be like, I love sex. Mm-mm. I love it. It just hurts. Never once. Because there's so much of the emotional stuff behind it. There's so much guilt and shame that they don't feel safe. They don't know what it means if they were to actually initiate, if they were to actually enjoy themselves, if they were to move and ride and feel and love it, and all that kind of stuff, and just free their body.
Release.
Like if they were to just do that, yes. And what is their partner going to think of them? You know, what are they going to think? Are they going to think that I'm, you know, all these negative words going through their head? Because at the end of the day, the sad and pathetic thing that many women think in society, and many men think as well, is that the version of women that men want is this demure, quiet, like pretty little thing out in public who will be insanely knowledgeable and, you know, whatever, adventurous in the bedroom. And it's like, those don't really go together. to be honest. If you
No.
have somebody who's confident enough to explore and try new things, rarely are they the one who's going to shut their damn mouth when you're spouting off. Like, they're not going to do
No,
that.
exactly.
And so,
exactly.
like, it's just allowing them to have this freedom and trusting that your partner still loves you for you. It's this whole thing. It's a whole thing.
Letting that flame
why,
just
when I work
like
with my patients,
actually.
Yeah. Well, because what I talk with my patients about is like, listen, you enjoying sex doesn't have a ton to do with your pelvic floor. Like, it does right now. It does right now. Because right now,
yeah.
fearful, painful sex. Right now,
Right.
It's fearful, painful sex, and we need to work on that, and we will work on that. So we do all the stuff. We do the manual therapy, and we do the down training, and we do the stretching, and we do all the things that need to be done in order to take them from fearful, painful sex to non-fearful, tolerant sex. And like, I can give you some counseling on that, but I highly recommend instead that to move from tolerant, comfortable sex to move to pleasurable sex, that we work with a coach who specializes in that. And I have sexual health coaches that I recommend, or it's a body code referral in order to be like, let's get rid of the trauma that's keeping you from getting there. But if you want to have a pleasurable sex life, this is 100% accessible to you, depending on what you want to do with that. If you feel like, you know what, I am happy to have a tolerant, pain-free sex life. That's really all I'm looking for. Okay, cool. You can hang out there. But if you're somebody who's like, I'm in painful, fearful sex and I want pleasure and excitement, we got some work to do. And it's 100% doable work, but we've got work to do.
Right. And it starts by letting them know that that's an option, which I think is what's so beautiful about this conversation even, is just that, like, nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about the differences, and nobody knows what to expect. You know, like, you identify with good sex is likely still going down that shame and guilt route, right? Like, deeply inside.
Like, I have had, like, okay, without sharing too much, let's just say my husband and I are quite compatible. He has a very high success rate if what we are talking about with sex is orgasm. That being said, many years of my life was tolerant. Like, I knew it would feel good. I knew that I knew my body well. I didn't want to do it. I felt tired. I just felt too much neediness all around. I've been out touched for the day. Like, I just wasn't interested. Right? So it took us a lot of, like I said, a lot of work to down train the stressors. And so, like, he as an extrovert is very much more like, he loves being around people. He feeds off the energy. He just feels so fulfilled. Whereas I, more on the introverted side of things, feel completely depleted by people. And so if you're somebody that I hang out with, it's a big deal. Like, I genuinely want to be there because I'm very selective about the people I'm around because it is so depleting for me. And so, like, he will take the brunt of a lot of social engagements for me, because while I may love the people there, it's too big of a group for me. That, like, I'm going to leave with a headache. I'm going to feel exhausted. It's just not worth my time.
Yeah.
It's like, I would love to hang out with every single person in that group, but in, like, a group of, like, 2 or 3 at a time.
A smaller setting. Yeah.
He'll take the brunt. He'll take the brunt of that, you know? He's
like, I got you, babe.
Yeah, for sure, because then he'll feel great.
You save that energy for later.
It's wonderful. Exactly. Yeah. And so we have, again, it's been a 20-plus year relationship and a lot of growth and a lot of learning. But it's like, knowing what each person's preferences are from a bunch of different perspectives, you know? Like, I am much more available when these certain things are checked off the list. He's much more available all of the time. And so it's just kind of like getting to know what works for each other so that you can move from tolerant into enjoyable. We've talked about, like, hormonally for me for a while there, my stress was basically tanking my hormones, and I was, like, murderous. I was angry. I hated everybody. And it was, like, heartbreaking for him and for me, because I knew that I loved him, but I was just like, could you need one more thing in life? Seriously? And he was like, I just was taking my inhaler. I'm like, it was so loud. You know, like, I was a hateful, angry person. It was terrible.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, I was just, had actually called, I ended up actually calling my friend who's a sex therapist, and I was like, there's something wrong with me. And she's like, yeah, but I don't think this is my area. I think we need to get you with a naturopath. And so we did, and it was like that was what the issue was, is I was like tanking my hormones. She
Mm-hmm.
was like, yeah, if you guys
Yeah.
take care of that and then you still need some help, come talk to me. And so
Mm-hmm.
but there, it's just kind of like getting all the things online, making sure that your person is supportive, making sure that there is enthusiastic consent on both sides. Like we
Mm-hmm.
chatted about this before,
Mm-hmm.
enthusiastic consent versus consent. You're going over
Yep.
to, like, if I was going to ask you to dinner and I was like, hey, Chelsea, you want to get some dinner? And you were like, yeah, I mean, that's fine if you
Mm-hmm.
want to. And then I was to be like, Abigail, do you want to get some dinner? And she's like, oh my gosh, I would love to get dinner with you. This is amazing. I've been waiting for you to get dinner with me. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go to dinner with Abigail. Chelsea, peace out. You know, like if
Right.
you're in a
Right.
relationship with somebody, you're like, hey, what do you think tonight? And the person's like, yeah, I mean, that's fine if you want to. That's not enthusiastic consent. That is
Mm-mm.
tolerant consent.
Right.
Even if this is a mutual, like, consensual long-term relationship, that is tolerant consent. Now, if you guys
Mm-hmm.
have set a boundary in your relationship that, hey, tolerant consent is perfectly fine for us, then that's your business. But if you're not familiar with the difference between tolerant consent and enthusiastic consent, get familiar with that,
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to make a big difference in the relationship.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I feel like we could go on about this for hours. Might need a part two.
We could, but we might have to skip
Unfortunately, you
some
have to go.
parts.
Yeah.
I do
Might need a
have to
part
go.
two.
But that being said, anybody who is in the Columbus area and would like to learn more about getting in tune with your body, understanding that physical manifestation of emotional symptoms, a little bit of that processing of what's going on in your body, and just kind of noticing those physical changes that happen as your emotions change. Elsa and I are doing a seminar if you want to come out and hang out with us. We'll put the details down in the show notes on April 8th from noon to 3, and then we're going to go out for a happy hour afterwards. So if you're in the Columbus
Yeah.
area, you want to join us, please check out the details below. We would love to have you. We are keeping this group quite small because we want to create a really safe, comfortable container for everybody so that you can feel comfortable sharing if you want to share, and knowing that you're not in a group of 30, 40, 50 people. So go ahead and check out the show notes on that. I think that's all I've got for today. Chelsea, anything for you to add?
You covered it, sister.
Well, thank you all for paying attention today and for listening, and I hope this helps you feel a little bit more comfortable having those anatomical and sexual conversations with your children, so that we can hopefully raise an entire society of enthusiastic, consenting sexual experiences, and increasing people's responsibility for their own sexual pleasure so that they are not seeking it
And
outside
love
of
and
themselves.
joy.
Love and joy. We need some love and joy in this world. But yes, have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you next time.